Looks like she's on track. Once again, lay tuck full, single twisting, triple somersault. Oh, she did it! She did it!
Please welcome Olympic champion Nikki Stone. Nikki, good night. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, and I am super excited to sit down with our guest today, Nikki Stone. Nikki, welcome to Born to Climb. Great to meet you.
I'm really happy to be here, James.
So, Nikki, you have accomplished so many great things, and I was looking, you've won like a lot of medals, 35 medals or something, and I wanted to ask you, of all the medals you have won, which one has been your favorite?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, and a lot of people would think it would be the gold medal, but I actually think it was the first World Cup I ever won, because it gave me this credibility, and it gave me the personal confidence to know that I could go out there and be one of the best in the world. And it was that first year I was competing. The weather was terrible. There was fog sitting on the site. We couldn't even see the jumps from where we were standing at the top of the hill. And to be able to overcome all those issues, to be terrified and still go out there and accomplish something, and to know that I could win on a day where everything was working against me, gave me the confidence to know that I always had that ability.
How does someone who grows up in New Jersey end up into aerial jumping?
Well, I actually started skiing on little tiny mountains. I don't even remember starting because I would just be put on skis, and like the ski boots go up half your leg because you're like 2 years old, and I don't even remember starting, but I skied, and then I also did gymnastics and did gymnastics competitively. And I didn't start aerials until I was 18. I grew up in Massachusetts. I had moved to Massachusetts at 5 years old, and I had always loved acrobatics. And we saw people on TV jumping into a pond, and I thought that would be really fun to try. So I entered the sport of freestyle and learned acro skiing, mogul skiing, and upright aerials. And then at 18, I was invited to go to Lake Placid, New York, and try aerials, and it was immediately that perfect match for me. It was the marriage between the skiing and the gymnastics, and fell in love with it immediately. Although it wasn't always smooth sailing, and actually I'm afraid of heights, so we go 50 feet in the air. So there was a lot to overcome in order to get to that place.
So that's what I wanted to know. Gymnastics is hard enough, and then put skis on your feet. How do you go from just skiing to being able to go off those jumps, do those flips?
Yeah, so we train on trampolines. We use bungee cords to give us that extra air time because we're in the air longer than a gymnast would be. And then we jump into a pool, and it's these plastic jumps that are like little plastic bristles, like simulated snow, that you flip and twist into a pool. And you're able to try new tricks, to learn how to do it, to learn how to twist with 160 centimeters of skis on your feet. And you really have to make sure that you know the mechanics so that you can ski away from these jumps. But we have to do it hundreds and hundreds of times into a pool for each new jump we want to do in order to do it on snow. So there's so many safety precautions that we take in order to go and try these new jumps. And I remember when I first saw the sport of aerials, I said, these people are crazy. And so all I wanted to do was a backflip, and that was it. And they slowly sneak it up on you, that you learn new levels again and again, and you finally get to a place where you can accomplish something really great just by taking those little steps. And they kind of tricked me into sticking with the sport by enticing me a little bit along the way of you can accomplish this little bit more. But it really helped me to be able to go out there and try something that scared me.
I'm glad you said that about how you're scared of heights. I I'm scared of heights, and that's one of the reasons I
Are you?
climb mountains, because it just keeps it, forces you to have that in your face. When we moved to Colorado and my kids got into snowboarding late in life, in a sense, they were in their 20s, but they're just athletic. They picked it up so quickly. But they make me so nervous because like every weekend they'll go out and they're like, Dad, check this out. And then they're doing higher and higher stuff. And I know that the backflips are coming. But when you are in the air, I've always wondered this, when you are flipping and you're in the air, what are you thinking? Or are you not thinking? It's just so dialed in.
So you're thinking about the mechanics that you need in order to do your jump, and believe it or not, we spot the ground every time we come around on a jump. So if you're flipping and twisting, you can spot the ground almost the entire time. And you're determining how high you are off the snow. And I don't know if you've ever seen a landing hill in aerials, but it looks dirty. And the reason is because they throw pine boughs on the hill. Because a lot of times on a gray day, the snow and the sky can look the same. And so they put the pine boughs for depth perception, so you can look up and quickly realize that you're still 50 feet off the snow, now 25 feet off the snow, now the ground's coming up quickly, to give you that idea of where you are so you can watch and make sure that you accomplish what you need to get to your feet to be able to ski away.
I didn't know that, but I remember, the snow always looks dirty under the jump, so that makes a lot of sense. So obviously in your career, you were already doing really well, advancing quickly, but then you got injured. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, plus your bounce back from that, because, most people listening to this are probably never going to go to the Olympics, but most people listening to this are going to experience setbacks in their life, and everybody does. So how did you get injured? Was it just because you kept doing it all the time, or was it a bad fall?
Yeah, believe it or not, my injuries was from landing too much. It was the compression over time. And even when we jump into the pool, we have 5 layers of fiberglass on our skis so the skis don't break. So you can just imagine what it does to your body, that each time you land and it's slapping the water. And then the way I jump, my trajectory is very up and down. Some people have a little flatter trajectory. And going straight up and down really helps you for landings. It makes it a little easier for the landing, but it's really hard on your body. And so all those landings over time, I ended up compressing a couple of discs in my back, and because it was 2 levels, I had 10 doctors tell me that I would never be able to ski again. And I pushed myself when I thought it was just a muscle spasm and kept jumping because I was at a contest where the girl who was in first place in the world didn't make it to finals, so I thought I could pull ahead of her, and pushed myself beyond what I really should have at the time because I was in such pain. But there's that drive in me that I can't seem to let go of. So the hard thing is it made me injured, but the good thing is that drive also brought me back when 10 doctors told me it wasn't possible.
Where did that drive come from, do you think?
I don't know. It's something that I always think that people are born with it or not. It's something that drive, when you throw up a child in the air, like you play with them and you throw them in the air, and some kids reach for your hands because they don't want to be thrown up, and other kids throw their head back and throw their arms off to the side, and I was that kid. I was someone who loved the thrill, I loved the excitement, I loved to push myself all the time. And, I did have 2 incredible parents that were accomplished in their own rights, but incredibly humble. And they let me believe that anything was possible. So I could push and have that drive and know that it was within the realm of something I could accomplish.
You bring up your parents. Everyone I've talked to on this show who's either, gone to Navy SEALs or gone to the Olympics, I've asked them about their parents in that, what do you think your parents did that helped foster just the kind of spirit and tenacity that helped you be successful?
So when I was 5 years old, I built my own podium out of tables and chairs, and I told them at 5 that I was going to win the Olympics someday. And they didn't say, well, that's, a long reach, or I don't know if you can do that. They said, okay, well, we can do this, but you're going to have to make sure that you're working incredibly hard. And they told me about a philosophy for success that they called the turtle effect. And they said, in order to be successful, you have to be like a turtle. You have to be soft on the inside. You need to have a hard shell, and you have to be willing to stick your neck out. And so I used this throughout my career, and it was something that they always gave me the tools to make sure I could go and accomplish something myself. And I have children myself now, and I realize there's a very fine line between pushing someone and just supporting them. And they were able to find that fine line to make sure that they were there for support, but they weren't the ones pushing me. It had to come from myself, that I was going to go out there and push the envelope to accomplish something great.
What a great analogy that your parents gave you. And that's,
yeah.
You turned that into your book.
Yes,
The Turtle Effect. Fantastic.
Yes.
So what I want to know is, you're in pain, you have all these doctors telling you you're not going to jump anymore. And so did you ever think, okay, I should listen to my doctors? Or did you just be like, nope? Like, walk us through that.
So when you hear it so many times, on the 10th doctor, when they're saying you shouldn't do this, you of course question it. You think, do they know something that I don't? But luckily I was at the stage in life where you feel invincible. You feel like, I know something they don't know, and I am tougher than most people are. And for me, it took two things that kind of helped push me back to continuing to look for doctors. And one was a poem called You Mustn't Quit. And it was a poem that was given to me when I was 10 years old as a young gymnast. And the poem was someone that was a role model of mine, and they told me that you have to find the passion for what you do, always love what you're doing, and that will help you make sure you don't quit. And on top of finding that poem again, right when I had my injury, I also found a picture of Joe Frazier. And in the picture it said Joe Frazier won the Olympics, and he did it with a broken fist. And I figured he needed his hand for boxing as much as I needed my back for jumping, so if he could come back from this, why couldn't I? And I finally did find a doctor in Boston, Massachusetts, who told me I could come back from this, but what he had me do was lift heavy weights to build up the muscles in my back to support the injured discs, because I had to be able to come back to jumping 50 feet in the air. I couldn't have surgery because it was two different disc levels, and if they fused those discs, I wouldn't be able to bend my back at all. So I really had to know how to build up the muscles, and so it could withstand the pressure of going 50 feet into the air. And so really it was this doctor taking a risk as well, because there could always be a lawsuit. If I went out there and hurt myself, then it's something that I could sue him, which I wouldn't do, but I understand that it was a risk on his part to tell me you can do this, and he did recognize that there was something different in me that said, I am going to go do this no matter what you say. So he believed in me, and luckily I had his support moving forward.
I got to say, I love your logic about, well, if he can win with a broken hand, then yeah, I can do this with a back. It's so funny. Would any of your friends describe you and use the word stubborn ever?
Yes. I definitely was stubborn, and my kids can attest to that as well.
Well, I have one of my kids is stubborn at times, but at the same time, that's a two-sided coin, because there's a certain strength to that you need if you're going to really perform at your best.
Yes, you need to be coachable as well. You can't be so stubborn that you won't listen to coaches. You have to have an understanding that someone does know a little more than you do at times. So you have to believe in yourself and have the stubbornness to know that there's something that you're going to push yourself. But at the same time, you have to be willing to listen to those around you that have the expertise, because no one can have great accomplishments without having support and education and understanding from people around them.
So when you started training to recover, and you had the blessings from that one doctor, you make your way back into competition, but what had changed in the time that you were out? Because, you know, as we know, everything changes, sports change, things evolve even faster than we realize, and we sometimes don't see it until we step back and then come back in. So what did you notice change when you came back?
Yeah, so I came back just 1 year before the next Olympics, and so it was a year of trials by a lot of the other athletes. They were trying harder degree of difficulty jumps, and we actually had our World Championships just 1 year before the Olympics. It was in Nagano, Japan, where we would have the Olympics 1 year later, and I thought it was a great way to test the fact that Nikki Stone was back. And unfortunately, it didn't go as well as I'd like, because the women had increased their degree of difficulty, and they were all doing harder jumps. And so I had to do a lot of soul searching. I finished in 11th place at that World Championships, and there was actually a sports journalist who wrote that Nikki Stone would never stand on the podium again. And I could listen to what he had to say, or I could find a way to believe in myself to try harder jumps. You know, even though I only had, 6 to 9 months to learn these new jumps, I had to make sure that I had that force to believe in myself to go out there. And that's what I did. I increased my degree of difficulty with just about, 6 to 8 months trying new jumps that I was going to be performing at the Olympic Games.
I think it's incredibly difficult for people when, let's say, a journalist comes out and says, hey, you'll never stand on the podium again. And whether that happens in sports or happens in work, or it could even be a bad performance review, or someone saying to somebody like, you'll never be an executive, or you'll never run your own business, or whatever it might be. But a lot of people still get swayed by that, because I think it touches on a self-doubt that they already have. So my question is, first, personally, were you always somebody that had a strong belief in yourself, or is that something that developed over time?
So it's a great question, and I had a lot of self-doubt after my injury. It destroys you. Your whole social circle kind of walks away from you. I had 10 doctors telling me it wasn't possible. I had coaches that looked on to other athletes. The athletes were increasing themselves, and so there was definitely a lot of self-doubt. And when that reporter wrote that I'd never stand on the podium again, that was the thing that propelled me forward. It was the thing that I didn't want to have something take me out of the sport. I didn't want someone to tell me I couldn't accomplish something. It's something that I make that decision. You don't make it. And it helps me to be able to build up that confidence again by thinking about the small victories I had. I was jumping when 10 doctors told me it wasn't possible. So I would think about all the little things that I accomplished. I would look at the strengths I had. I was really good at landing jumps. Even though I had fears, I was great at performing the more difficult jumps. And so I kept focused on those elements, and it really helped build my confidence, because confidence isn't something we're born with. It's something that we develop over time, and so I knew it was something that I could develop, and I had to take those steps in order to make it happen.
For those of you who are listening, I hope you heard what Nikki just said there. When you look at trying to build your confidence, it's something we can be intentional about, but it's looking back at our past victories. It's looking at the things that we're doing right now, and that's incredibly powerful. So you said you had to rebuild some of your confidence there, but was it lower earlier in your life as well, and you had to build that? Or was that kind of the first time you began to have self-doubts?
I think we all have them from time to time. I think there's always that level of, can I accomplish this? And it's not giving up. It's making sure that you're constantly going out there and trying again and again, because you're not going to accomplish something if you listen to what everyone says. You're not going to accomplish something if those doubts creep up all the time. I think this was probably the most severe level I'd had of self-doubt, but there were always times along the way where I didn't know if something was possible, but I had to make sure that I was seeking that inner voice that told me, you can go out there and accomplish something, believe in yourself, and don't listen to what anyone else says.
Did you ever have a day during that period where you thought, no, I can't do this?
Of course, I'm human. There are definitely times that you question, is everyone else right? You know, are these 10 doctors right and I'm wrong? And so I fell into a depression. I was really depressed when I hurt my back. As I said, my social circle was gone. I kind of pushed myself into the corner because I was so upset and didn't want to have the help around me. And I had to make sure that I was seeking the people that were there. And it really helped me because you do give up at times. There are times that you say, I don't know if I can do this. You wouldn't be human if you didn't. So I realized that, you know, as hard as it was something that I could do because I had done great things in the past. And I had the right people around me to be able to help me go out there and seek what I'd dreamt of since I was 5 years old.
Nikki, what would you say to somebody who, let's say they come to you and regardless of the situation, maybe it's in sports, but they're in that same moment, like a really low depressive moment. It's not just a bad morning, but you know, it's like 10 days of, I don't know if I can do this. Maybe they're trying to write a book. Maybe they're trying to launch a business. Maybe they're trying to be successful in their career. Maybe they're just trying to be a good mom or dad, but they have that moment. What would you say to them in that situation to help them get out of it?
So in sports psychology, we have something called thought stopping. And I have a master's degree in sports psychology. It was something I always pursued. It helped me going to the Olympic Games. I really had to use my mind over some of my athletics at the time because of my injury. I had to make sure that I was training smarter. And so in thought stopping, you have these negative spiral of thinking. You know, I'm not good enough. I can't accomplish this. I feel sorry for myself. And if you have 3 to 5 words, phrases, images in your mind that you can call to and pull them up, it's going to put you in a much more positive frame of mind. And when we're thinking positively, study upon study upon study show that we're not just stronger physically, we're stronger mentally, we're stronger emotionally, we're more successful, all just by thinking positively. And if it's something that you have to fake it until you make it, you can do that. But for me now, it's an image of my children. It's wanting to be strong for my children and prove to them that they can go out there and accomplish anything. So just by thinking of my kids, it gives me that power inside. And so people need to find what that passion or power is so that when they're thinking negatively, they imagine this image. And sometimes it could be as simple as thinking of the word empowerment or, you know, be strong, just whatever it is that you can call to mind to make sure that you're switching things around so you're seeing things in a positive light rather than dwelling and hanging on that negativity.
I love that, the idea of having some sort of image that you go to, that you gather strength from when you're in tough times. Do you have a mantra that you also go to find strength with?
Yeah, well, I always rely on that turtle effect, you know, to make sure I have that soft inside, to have the hard shell, and to stick my neck out. And it's served me well for so many years, and it's something that I used, you know, when I came back from injury. It's something I used when I would go through a challenging time personally or professionally. It's always making sure that I love what I do, to have the ability to have that hard shell and to be able to push back when we do have adversities, and to make sure that I'm constantly sticking my neck out, believing in myself, taking the risks of trying hard things so that I can develop that turtle and make it soar.
How important is visualization to an athlete in the sport, especially that you were in?
Extremely important, and particularly when I had the injury I went through, I had to rely a lot on imagery because I couldn't do as many jumps because of my injured back. I had to make sure that I was imagining it perfectly in my mind. And one other thing I learned in sports psychology is that when you do something visually, you don't want to imagine it from a camera's view. watching it from the sidelines. You actually want to be in your own eyes, seeing through. You're looking out. I see my skis going down the hill in front of me. I'm looking at the jump as it's coming up, so that I could go through it and try to imagine every little element. And they've put electrodes on people to try to see what happens when they're using this imagery, and they're actually triggering those exact muscles they need in order to perform the task. And mentally, it also helps stimulate a lot of the activities you need, because you know exactly the plan that you're going to take. And I remember like the night before the Olympics, I had to go through my jump 100 times in my head, again and again and again. And if it was something didn't go well, that I crashed the jump and imagined it that way, then I'd have to go start again and go through it 100 times again. And I remember I got to the point where I was so sick of thinking of my jump again and again, but I knew that it was going to pay off, and it did.
I'm glad you said that about visualization, about not viewing it third person, but like as if you're actually doing it. Because I'd always wondered that. People tell you visualize, and so I would think, okay, well, which view do I visualize from? I think people find visualization difficult, though. At least I find it difficult at times. And for most people listening, we're not in sports. And so the question is, how can someone take the power of visualization and use that in their daily life? And before you answer that, you would have heard of these studies, but I had just heard of one the other day where people visualized with lifting weights and their muscle mass increased, even though they never lifted weights. It's insane. Yes,
exactly. Yes, that's very true. And it may not be something that's easy or natural, but the more you try to perform the visualization, the more it's going to help out. And it is something that I do even to this day. I try to imagine getting up on stage and what the audience is going to look like and what's going to happen if something goes wrong. And the more you can put these elements in place, the more it's going to benefit you. And it has to be the sights, the sounds, the smells. Every element is going to help you have that understanding, to be prepared if anything does go wrong, and to make sure you're really in a good place moving forward.
Well, it's interesting you say that about being on stage. So in my entire career, every time I've gone to a place to do a keynote, I always ask if I can get into the room before, whether it's the night before. I just want to see it. And it's not always possible, but it's a difference for me. Like if I walk into a room, in a sense, cold, like I've never seen this before, I don't know, it's just like an extra bit to settle myself down, versus if I can go in the night before and check the room out and I stand on stage. And so I don't know, it's quite visualization like you would use in sports, but it's maybe a fraction of it.
Yeah, the more we can prepare, the better off we're going to feel. Whether you go through it in your mind, whether you actually step onto the stage and feel it out, the more prepared, the better off you're going to be. But we also have to make sure we're flexible, because the last minute the room could flood and you have to go somewhere else, and you have to tell yourself this may change. And that was something we always had to do in aerials. Like the weather could change things, in a heartbeat. And we had to be ready to be resilient, to change, to be flexible, because things are going to change all the time. You have to make sure that you have a backup plan in place and know that you're not going to freak out when that does happen.
I was talking to Johnny Quinn. Have you ever met Johnny Quinn?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great guy. Amazing story about him and his bobsled career. But I was asking him about talent, and basically to say, when it comes to success, how much is talent, how much are other things, and what are those other things? And he had a great answer in that he said, well, in the athletic arena, in certain areas, of course, there's some talent, and some you're born with for sure. And every domain, in a sense, is going to have a little bit of that. Maybe once we get out of the athletic arena, physical talent is not necessarily going to be as important. But pushing talent aside, and let's just talk about life, business, running a business, what do you see are the greatest hallmarks that are going to help someone be successful?
So I do agree with him. You really do have to have that drive, the passion, you have to have the love for what you're doing. I think that's paramount. It's really essential to love what you do, because if you're not loving it, it's really hard to get up every day, to get out of bed, to want to pursue it. So for us, it's once every 4 years that we're able to go out there and perform at Olympic Games. And if you're not loving it every day, then it's going to be a long 4 years. And it's going to be hard to fight through the hard times. It's going to be hard to fight through the fact that 10 doctors tell you you can't do this anymore. So if you don't have that love, nothing else is going to come to you. So I really think that's essential. I do think it's essential that we have the ability to be flexible and to fight back, to be persistent, to always push the envelope, and knowing that if there is going to be some kind of adversity, we do have a way of coming back, having plans in place if things go wrong, or to just know that you're not going to give up by planning ahead, to know that these adversities are going to be there. And then I also think that there has to be a bit of a risk taker in us. We have to have that ability to go out there and try something innovative, to be new at what we do, because there's always going to be that person in the wings waiting to overtake you. Is there going to be that competitor in business that's going to come out there and try something you haven't tried? So if you're not always innovating, if you're not always pushing the levels, then they're going to surpass you.
What would you say to the person who's listening to this, and you made the comment about you've got to love what you do, and they're thinking about their job right now, thinking, I don't love what I do, but I have to do this? Is there a point where we can just choose to love whatever it is we're doing? And when does that not work and we actually have to do something different?
Yes, I believe you can definitely love even something you don't think you do. I remember when I went to my first Olympics after I had retired, and I was going up there to watch, and I thought to myself, I am so glad I don't have to feel this anxiety anymore. And I realized that I'd convinced myself that I loved anxiety while I was competing. No one loves anxiety, but it was something that I'd convinced myself of. And so you have to look at some of the elements that may be more challenging and look at it in a different light. The anxiety made my life interesting. It made my life exciting. And so I would try to see those elements of it. And there is a reason we choose our career and our lifestyle. So we have to think back to those initial times that we started out, what made it exciting? What was that element? And make sure we try to capture that more often. I also think it helps to change up our routine. We always say, okay, it's easiest if I just do it in this order because I know how to do that. It's you don't even have to think about it, but not even thinking about it makes it boring. So I always say just to even change up the order in the way you're doing something will bring that light back to whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
I've talked to a lot of executives over the years, and some have confided in me and said things like that they don't like what they're doing and they're not really happy doing it, but they're so far into it that they feel like, I can't leave now. And they'll even make a comment like, I still got to pay the mortgage and my kids are in college or whatever it might be. And it's sort of like this trap. But I think a lot of people feel the same today. They are not happy in their situation, and maybe they've tried to get happy and it's just not in alignment for them. But there's such a resistance to making a change, whether that's to a different company or to start your own business. And you've talked about this, about fears and taking risks. And so what would you say to people who are in those throes of decision, thinking like, I'm not happy, I need to make a change, but I'm scared?
Yeah. So we all have fears. I feared going 50 feet into the air. You may fear trying something new because it could fail, but if you don't try, you've already failed. So I always say that if you want to accomplish something great, you are going to have to push yourself and try it. And it can help to make calculated risks, weighing out all the pros and cons, and realize that the excitement of a new job should be an enormous con, because the majority of the time when we do take a risk, it really does pay off. And it may not the first time. You may go for, you quit your job, you went in to get an interview, and the interview went really poorly. But that doesn't mean that this risk didn't pay off. It just means that you learned something from that first interview that you can use moving forward. And it's always pushing the envelope of telling yourself, I have to try something in order to make life exciting again. I have to be able to push myself. If I want to find that passion again, if I want to find that love of what I'm doing, I'm going to have to step out of this comfort zone. And there's always going to be something that's going to come up. And, you obviously found a way to make a living in the first place, so there is a way to be able to do this again. I don't encourage people to just everyone leave their jobs that they're doing. The best way is to try to find the love of what you're doing first. But if you are just continually miserable every day you get up, there's got to be a way to find something that you love more. And when I was growing up, my dad always said, find out what you love to do and then find a way to make money at it. And it's what I did with speaking and what I did with aerials. It was something that I'd love to do, and you're gonna make it work if you have that passion.
I mean, you're a great example of somebody who's pivoted their career. Like, all athletes have to retire at some point. And then unless they stay in the sport as coaches, they've got to pivot to something different. I think a lot of athletes have difficulty pivoting and picking something up. What made you want to get into what you're doing now with speaking on stages?
So when I was in college, in order to graduate with honors, we had to write a thesis. And so my thesis in sports psychology was elite female athletes retirement from sport, and that eased that transition. And I thought I had all the answers because I'd done all the research. I had an understanding. You find a new focus, making sure that you make it something you love and you turn to that focus and pay attention to that. And so I thought I had everything in place, and then I retired and it still went haywire. I still had no idea what I was doing. I still felt lost. I still felt that I was craving that past life. And so it's okay to go through those challenging times, but then you pick up the bootstraps and you find a way to move forward. And for me, it was scary to be able to do triple backflips, and it was scary for me to stand on a stage. But I realized that I could always overcome something with the jumping. I actually took the jump and did it, and it was this exhilarating feeling, and it's the same when I stand on stage. So if you can take elements of what worked for you in the past, you can use that moving forward. And it really helped me on that retirement process to find something that kind of mimicked all the things I loved about aerials, and helped me get on the stage in front of a group of people. And now, not only is it something where I feel like I accomplished something, but I have people coming up to me saying, I want to change something in my life because of something you said, and that's so fulfilling.
It's got to be a big shift to, you win the gold medal in Nagano in '98, tons of media. I saw you were on David Letterman, and everybody knows your name. And then it's a pivot to a completely different career, because now you're a business owner, right? And you have to get clients and all of that. I'm curious, though, how is the Nikki Stone today different than the Nikki Stone who stood on the podium in Japan?
A few more wrinkles. But there's so many elements that I think just are ingrained in me. It was things that I grew up with. I teach that to my children now. I think I'm a little more level-headed. I don't jump into things. I do take those calculated risks. I weigh out the pros and cons. I'm not throwing myself off cliffs or jumping out of planes anymore because I think about the consequences. I realize I have to be healthy for my children. So I may approach life a little differently now, and the risks may look a little different, but I'm still trying to take them in a safe way because I realize that it's not just me relying on my future, it's my family as well.
And what's Nikki Stone's next mountain to climb?
Oh, good question. So there's so many things I like to do with speaking. There's so many different elements I want to try with speaking, and it's being able to do more speeches throughout a year. And my kids are getting older now, so I can start pushing and developing that more. I'm working with a company that uses ketones for performance within sports, and so I'm working with them as well. And then raising kids. It's always something new every day. Now that they're teenagers, there's a lot of fears that I have along those lines, and a lot of adversities I have to overcome. But it's rewarding seeing them have a smile on their face because they've accomplished something. And so it's always going to be that I have that support for them, just like my parents had for me.
When your teenager smiles, that's a good day for any parent, so for sure.
It is.
Nikki, if people want to know more information about you, or there's companies out there that would love to have you come in and talk about your message, your story about resilience and overcoming challenges and risk-taking, where should they go?
They can go to my website, which is www.nikkistone.com, which is Nikkistone. And they can go on to YouTube and see my demo videos under Nikki Stone Gold, or they can go to Olympic Gold under Motivational Minutes. And they can see I have Motivational Minutes where it gives bits of motivation every day, so they can have that little boost in the morning to put them on the right path and make sure they're getting out of the bed in the right direction. And then people can find me on LinkedIn as well, and reach out, let me know how I can help support you and your company.
Can you send me all those links? Because I'll put those in the show notes for people that want to go and click on those. That'd be great. Well, Nikki, thanks for taking the time to sit down and chat with us. It's been great to meet you. One of the things that I've been so impressed with you in terms of not only your amazing athlete, but not a lot of people can go through that kind of injury, have that many people say, excuse me, have that many people say, hey, I think your time is done. But you just had this tenacity to go, nope, I'll dictate when I'm done. And I love that spirit. If there's one thing there's many things I'm taking from this interview, but the one thing at the top of the list is just that spirit of, hey, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to have a vision for my life, and I'm not going to let other people write my story. I'm going to write it. And because you wrote it, you stood on the podium for a gold medal, which you had visioned back when you were a kid. So that's incredibly inspiring to me. I know you're inspiring to many people. So keep up the fantastic work, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, James. It's been an absolute pleasure.